Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see this great big audience today to welcome Adelaide, who I think many of us know. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her bio in a minute, but we did line up our spring series already for next spring, so I'm just going to give you a quick taste of what that will be, and you'll probably get the program and emails in the beginning of the next year. It starts in February. So we have opening up the spring session is Jeff Amestoy, former Vermont Chief Justice who's written a book. And he's going to talk about his book, Winter's Time, Justice, Gender, and Celebrity of the Roaring Twenties of Rural Vermont. And it's based on a historical murder that happened here in Vermont. And he did a lot of research on it. So, and then we have Vermont Digger's evolution from a one-woman newsroom to a Vermont news organization with Skye Barish from Vermont Digger. And following that, we're going to learn about cannabis, past, present, and future, with James Pepper, chair of the Vermont Cannabis Control Board, telling us kind of what's happening in that arena, which is always changing. And then a really interesting one, why we eat what we eat, using behavioral science to make better food choices, with Kimberly Lipinski, who's Director of Nutrition and Wellness with the Central Vermont Council of Aging. And then Attorney General Charity Clark, will be talking about some of the pending cases that are going on, and there's a number of them, as we all know, defending the rule of law. And after that, we have quilting, plain and fancy, about the history of quilting and the Vermont Quilt Association. And then Vermont Cross Country Roots, we're going to have Sam Van Trapp talking about cross-country skiing and the Trapp Family Lodge and the history of that and how it came to be where it is. And the closing for speakers that session will be the Museum of Everyday Life, which I don't know how many of you have been to in Glover. It's quite a fun place to go. And Claire Dolan will be speaking and showing lots of images talking about her museum there. And then we'll have a film series with Rick Winston, which we always look forward to, and begins next week for this session. And this will be delving into the films of the 1930 to 34, before there was film, what would you say, promiscuity and divorce and all those things were allowed. There was no censoring in the beginning. We're going to get to see some of those films before they started censoring. So that should be fun. Okay, so a little bit about Adelaide Murphy Terrell, who many of us know. She works out of her studios in Vermont and New Hampshire. She is a natural history illustrator for the Wellborn Ecology Fund, and I think many of you who get the Times Argus have seen her wonderful illustrations that go with stories each week. It's part of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation program, which encourages ecological and environmental science knowledge. She is also a large format painter, commercial painter, and backdrop painter. Her own fine art paintings often have a dual nature, combining direct scientific observation with memory and allegory. Adelaide has a BA from the University of Vermont and an MFA from the Art Institute of Boston. Let's give her a good warm welcome. Thank you. Oh, and turn off your phones.
I'm not sure if my mic is on. Can you hear me? Okay? Okay, great. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for coming. And thank you, Ginny Callan, for inviting me. And to the OLLI organizing committee. And of course, to Kiana, Vic, and Sierra for technical help. I'm going to talk today about why I do what I do, what motivates and inspires me, and what pays my bills. I encourage you to raise your hands and ask questions throughout if you would like. Okay, now I have to get my thing. Okay. Uh-oh. No. That's okay. I can do it manually, but I was going to use the laser. Oh, the laser works? Okay. So I'm going to do it manually. My career has primarily taken place on three fronts. I have been concurrently creating commercial art, fine art, and natural history for my entire professional life. All three of these methods of art making have influenced and informed each other. in ways that were unexpected and deeply satisfying. They are very different from each other in process and in purpose, and I thought you might be interested in how and why these three disciplines have interested and guided me over the years. The first I will talk about is the commercial backdrop painting business, which I did in New York City and to some degree here in Vermont up until a year and a half ago. Here we are, years and years ago, when we were just starting out in Manhattan as a commercial scene painting studio. We are a woman-run business headed by the inimitable Sarah Oliphant in the orange jumpsuit, and me. I was 26 years old, and we thought we ran the world. There was a lot of money to be made, relatively speaking, and we had very few individual financial responsibilities. We were painting backdrops for high-end photographers, fashion designers, filmmakers, and art directors, working for ad agencies like Sterling Cooper, which was the ad agency in Mad Men, if you're familiar with that show. That was the 70s. This is the early 80s. Deadlines were intense. Men wanted to be in charge of everything, and there was a lot of day drinking whiskey in those advertising agencies. Most everyone was overworked, and a lot of money was wasted. But we were in charge of what we were doing, and it felt great. We were painting morning, noon, and night. We wore our paint clothes everywhere, and we were making enough money to pay New York City rents and buy beautiful, very expensive shoes. Oops. Here we are with our respirators around our necks, standing in front of and on an enormous portrait backdrop. We wore respirators because we often used airbrushes. Not always, but often. Because you can paint an enormous you can cover a lot of canvas with an airbrush. The work for commercial scene painting is typically large format and very time sensitive. We get a 20 by 40 foot job on a Monday, and it's due on Friday. There is no time to second guess or doubt things. You just plow ahead, doing the very best you can do. There is a great thrill to this. It's speed painting, speed team painting. This particular drop was for the headquarters of Hartz Mountain Industries, which was funny because I think of them as pets of dogs and cats, and we're painting seagulls. This was a book, I have it here, produced by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City on fashion for their Costume Institute. They used one of the painted sets we did for a Vogue magazine fashion shoot for the cover of the book, so we were really proud of that. And check out that dress. I mean, so they decided to use it for the cover of the book. Here's the interior of the book. Again, this is all, I'm doing it on my thing, but I'm sorry I took a picture of this on the rug because that's very distracting, but this is the backdrop, this is painted, the checkerboard floor is painted, and all the stuff behind this model is painted. Very, very roughly. When you look at it closer, you can see paint drips and brush strokes, which is exactly what the client wanted. So now I have to go like this. This is a photograph of our current studio in Bushwick, New York. There are 6 backdrops stapled to the floor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this one's going to be stapled. That's Sarah, that's me. This is an old drop, obviously, because there's the World Trade Towers. 10 by 20 cityscape. It shows how we roll the canvases on carpet tubes to transport them. They are shipped nationally and internationally, but primarily they are used in New York City on a 3-day rental basis. So we have a stock of maybe 2,000 backdrops that we've painted, and those go out every day of the week for 3 days, and then we get it back and it goes into our rental stock. And they're rented again and again. We have 40-year-old backdrops that are still going out. Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about how you'd actually, would you draw it? Would you do a computer, drawing or graphic?
No, we don't usually. Sometimes we'll use a projector. We'll have a picture of a New York City skyline. We'll put it in a projector and project. But oftentimes we use, it's very old world what we do. We'll use, we'll have a drawing here and we'll do what Michelangelo did, which is square out. It's interesting. Our canvas is stapled to the floor. We put nails on the edge of the canvas into the floor every foot, and then we string through that into a grid. Then we hold a drawing that's gridded out, and square by square by square, we draw it in. So very low tech, but fun. It's fun. This is a really similar backdrop that was used for an ad. Again, World Trade Towers. This is Chris Rock advertising some show he's in, and they've just canted the photograph and made it look like he's twisted. This is the photo on the right is something we did for the New York Times magazine story about the Dalai Lama. The background is applied gold leaf on wood panels to create a golden room effect that reflects off his face. That was special for us. This behemoth, is that how you say it, behemoth? Was a set for Marc Jacobs, who's a big deal fashion designer, which took place at the Park Avenue Armory for New York Fashion Week. This was 20,000 square feet of painted canvas to look like the fashion editor, Diana Vreeland's famous living room. She called it her garden of hell, and it kind of looked like a crime scene. I know. Here's a photo of Diana Vreeland. Oh, it doesn't show because it's red. Right there. That's a photograph of Diana Vreeland supine on her Davenport. And then a beautiful Jeremiah Goodman watercolor painting of kind of what Marc Jacobs wanted us to reproduce, but massively huge. So he would, can you not hear me when I go this way?
Yeah.
Okay. There, see, I can try my body. Come on. So they would give us this for reference and then set us free. It was a nightmare, this job. These are some of the drops being painted on the floor of the rental space. We had to rent a space because it was so big it wouldn't fit in our studio. And this is a shot. This is a shot of one that has been hung up. There's nothing that we painted in this particular photograph. They show a haute couture spectacle presented by Valentino and the son of an Italian artist you may be familiar with, Piero Fornasetti. They took over the former Whitney Museum and staged a show about the five senses using Fornasetti's drawings. This room is about touch, and to pass through the room you can't avoid walking into these dangling arms. Our job was to paint the room pertaining to vision. We had to paint an enormous set of eyes with ultraviolet paint that as you walked through the black lit room, they would appear to open and shut. It was another nightmare of a job as we were painting in the dark with invisible paint. I mean, really, somehow it worked out. These were the images in black and white we were given to overlay and reproduce. And the pictures are hard, but here we are painting them. You can see that's one eye. And it's just, it worked. I mean, somebody figured it out. We just did what we were told to do. And then it's kind of, can you see the dark line that goes like this? That's the lashes. And what happened when you walked through, you didn't see that, the iris of the eye. So it would go bing. Was fun. These are typical samples of a variety of jobs we were asked to do. This was Tina Fey, and this is Matthew McConaughey. It's a fashion ad. This is, what's his name? Jimmy Stewart for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And then they wanted to copy that idea. So he is not standing in a room, that's a backdrop, flat backdrop to look like he's standing in a hallway. And it works, I think it works. And remember those days? So very typical for we paint hundreds and hundreds of skies just to give the feeling that someone's outside. This was an interesting job. The Guggenheim Museum was hosting a dinner with Christian Dior for the Hilma af Klint show in 2018. We were tasked with painting 36 11-foot round canvases as tablecloths for the donor's fancy dinner. You can see up here, there's 4 artists work, just starting one of them. And this is our Bushwick studio as we're laying them out, but there were a lot of them. But it was a really interesting job to study her work and to study her palette.
Adelaide, how many people were often working on these projects?
It depends on the job and it depends on the deadline, and we drag people off the street, honestly. But the people that work there all the time, there's really only 4 or 5 of us. This on the left, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. It's just, this on the left is color samples that we presented the client. They're on pieces of canvas based off Clint's palette. All those colors needed to be approved by a committee of production designers, but as often happens, the closer we get to the deadline, the less fussy production designers get. And deadlines are always really intense. The shot on the right, which kind of looks like bottle caps, is an aerial view of the tables in the Guggenheim. You can see the curve of the ramp of the, this beautiful Frank Lloyd Wright building. You can see the thing. Yeah, we wanted to get some of those back, but we couldn't. I think they gave them to the donors. Here we copied the Lakov's cave paintings for a fashion shoot, and I just put it in so I could say, faux Lakov. This is to show you the scale of some of the work. This is a painted curtain for Mariah Carey for a Radio City Music Hall concert. And again, this was way too big for our studio, so we had to rent a space to go into it. That must be me sitting down. This was the last job I worked on a year ago. It was a huge undertaking, painting drops for the interior of a lavish wedding tent for the Tisch family of New York University fame. This is, here are some on-site photos of the installation. Wow. This is massive. It was in Long Island. Oh no, it wasn't in Long Island. It was in Purchase, New York.
Got it.
Yep. The Tisches took these, but most all of them come right back to us. We would have loved to have these back because we would have cut them up, changed them, and but we didn't get them back. This is what the wedding looked like, which is amazing, and it's just our backdrop way in the back, but it goes around the whole room. But look at that. God. No. Good question. Are they still married? Mixing, blending, splashing, pooling, sponging, and spraying, all this combines to create a physical and visual experience that is very satisfying to me. It is amazing what excellent artistic decisions can be made when you are working so hard and so fast as a team. The commercial world in New York City is public. It's frantic and time sensitive. Our work is directed, judged, and witnessed by scores of people, and then it is paid for, and we are on to the next job. We never consider it high art, but we do always try to make it beautiful, nuanced, and right for the client. The subject matter of this work is irrelevant to me. It rarely has any significance. The work is about paint, problem solving, and teamwork, and to me, it's a celebration of those things. The backdrop here, painted for the photographer Annie Leibovitz, is a modeled canvas in graduating shades of brown. Very typical. We paint portrait drops all the time, and all of Annie Leibovitz's are our backdrops. This photograph was exhibited at Hauser and Wirth Gallery. Okay, enough of that. That's the sexy part of the presentation. And now we're on to something else. At the same time as I'm doing this frantic, noisy, sloppy work for fashion and advertising, I have always maintained a quieter career in Vermont as a botanical and natural history illustrator. This work is typically very small and exacting. All elements must be true and right. This has been a lifelong interest of mine and a great source of happiness for me. here I am working in the state entomology lab. I'm friends with Trish Hansen, who is a former state entomologist. She was very generous, sharing her massive collection of specimens and her gorgeous, high-powered microscope with me on a weekly basis. Is it okay, my microphone?
It's a little fuzzy.
It's a little fuzzy. Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Most all of the illustration work I do for, and Ginny just said all this, but the Center for Northern Woodlands Education. I've been the illustrator for a series of weekly ecology articles that appear in 21 newspapers across New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. I think maybe in Massachusetts too. Since 2002, it's underwritten by the Wellborn Ecology Fund of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. The series strives to educate readers about the natural world and to encourage land, water, flora, and fauna stewardship. And they have a great magazine called Northern Woodlands, which I also illustrate for. These are examples for those weekly articles.
Are you creating new pieces every week, or do you have kind of a library that you can draw from also?
Well, I don't get paid if I do take them from the library. So I do them every week.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do reuse them because I have 1,500 of them now. The articles themselves are written by different naturalists throughout New England. I am sent an article each week and decide on how to illustrate it. I draw or paint it, scan it, and email it in. Here, the subject matter is everything to me, and I try to do the best I can. But the final product is negligible, and the drawings go from the drawing table to the scanner and then to a drawer where they join the other 1,500 dormant drawings. What I try to do as an illustrator is to capture the reader's attention in whatever way I can so they will read the article. I'm trying to lure them in. These are some of the ways I try to entice a potential reader. Well, there's that, and then this is I was asked to illustrate. There was an article on something called dog vomit slime mold. So that wasn't going to be a very interesting illustration. So I solicited my dog Henry to come into the picture and just make that look like what's happening here. Poor dog. He didn't do it. This is a fishing spider, super large and non-aggressive New England resident, and I thought this depiction might stop people in their tracks. I have since found out that actually they do bite, but it doesn't hurt very much.
Was that your hand with the spider?
Yeah, well, it wasn't, I didn't have the spider. This is a star-nosed mole that I like. Reality is stranger than fiction. Because printing in color no longer costs more, I started to paint the illustrations. This is just a sweet little mud puppy I like. With both scene painting and the illustration work, I was solving visual problems for a client, not for myself. I needed to move towards a more self-directed path, and I wanted to use the methods I learned painting large format, loose and fast, with the scientific information I had gleaned from the exacting illustration work. I wanted to understand why biological forms and processes interested me so deeply, and I wanted to express that search in a loose and dynamic way, or what I saw as a dynamic way. For my own work, I just, like with backdrop painting, staple my canvas to the floor, or as in this photo, I look like I made a mistake. I wasn't used to seeing it this big. But in this case, a wood panel on the floor, and I paint standing with my brush taped to 3-foot-long bamboo pole. I spatter, drag, squeegee across it, pool paint until it dries, and then go back in and get finer and finer and finer. And these are the brushes. You can look at them later, but this is a 40-year-old bamboo pole that I've used, and used big house painting brushes, which I'm sure shocks August Burns. I never paint vertically or on an easel for my own work. You can see that I use the floor of my studio as a palette. This painting is titled A Change in the Weather. I like to paint large because it encourages me to stay loose and physically at ease. I have a tendency to get too tight and detailed, and I'm always trying to avoid too much of that. There is a serendipity and an opportunity for accidents painting this way, and I find that there are many delightful surprises when you give up some control. This is a simple bee balm flower. This painting, called Monkey Island, is a very large polyptych, which means many panels. It references the idea of bridges and vectors. Overall, it's 48 inches by 66 inches and made up of 5 panels. The center panel is the overview of Monkey Island, which is where we live. And the 4 side panels serve to show what is happening there, a fragmented narrative of sorts. I intended there to be a sense of decay and a feeling of an abandoned civilization. These images toggle between the real and the fantastic. My artistic bent is towards the relationship between human culture and the natural world. We strive to understand the world. This is what I think anyway. We strive to understand the world, to explain the human enterprise, and to establish codified systems of belief. Our knowledge of the world constantly shifts and evolves according to the paths we take. The political climate, our age, our health, our culture and environment are all veils we look through to understand the world. And I think I look through the veil of natural history. Here is a detail of that painting showing our sometimes precarious pathway. I often use the image of an ape or monkey to signify our innocent and perhaps half-witted selves, our primordial selves. This painting is called Moth, an even larger polyptych, 40 inches by 108 inches. The center panel shows oil rigs and platforms in the milky distance and references our technological invasion of the ocean. I wanted it to look kind of beautiful as a trick to attract. The 4 side panels again provide a narrative including our crumbling icons of the past and our displacement. This narrative also highlights the emergence of Earth's most tenacious and successful creatures, the insects. This is depicting an ancient column. If you were close to this painting, you'd see little tiny black dots around there. This is a blow up of that section. And those are probably, they're called a tenucid moth. It's a day-flying moth that you're probably familiar with. It's very common and dark brown with a bright blue head. And it's a day-flying moth. This is a larva about to emerge. And that panel is a detail, and I'm trying to get across the idea that we often feel displaced. And here's a couple more monkeys. This painting is called Helter Skelter and refers to the havoc we sometimes cause in the environment. And this is funny because this painting sold, and the person who bought it said, "I love that painting because it's so joyful and free and kind," and I just was quiet because that wasn't really what my intent was. Has a little tiny penis too. This is another ape ready for, tentatively ready for battle. It's called Taming the Butterflies. There's all little yellow butterflies up at the, oh, you can see them there. Okay. I will show you a few large pieces that I painted to explore questions I have. This is a giant squid, sometimes called a kraken, that lives at an ocean depth of 3,000 feet. Not the abyss, but getting close to it. Females can reach a length of 43 feet. So I came yesterday and I measured this room, and the width of this room is 40 feet. So that's a big cephalopod. They have the largest eyes in the animal kingdom, measuring up to 10 inches or more in diameter. It's because they're so deep down and it's so dark down there. Curious to me is that they have a very short lifespan for a creature this large, maybe 5 years. Learning this made me wonder if that makes them less worthwhile or worth less respect, the respect that a large ancient Galapagos tortoise has, or a 70-year-old elephant, or a humpback whale, which is 60 feet, I think, and lives for 90 years. So the squid is at once enormous and ephemeral, which is an unusual combo. They have rarely been observed by humans in the wild, though they have been fleetingly photographed using submerged cameras. So I'll just tell you this quick little story. So I read an article about this giant squid that was identified off the coast of Japan, and these fishermen were in very, very, very deep water, and they let down these lures, these things that look, I've made them look like chandeliers, to try to, just randomly, to try, they can't see this, they randomly trying to snag a squid. And that actually, that little thing right there is actually a yellow rubber fisherman's glove. Because I measured it, because if the eye is 10 inches, then that's the size that the glove would be. So what happened on this fishing trip, they did snag, he's fixing my thing. You know, a squid has 8 tentacles like an octopus, and then they have these 2 long feeder arms that catch prey and then they bring it into their mouth. Well, the feeder arm got caught on the lure, ripped out of the squid, and they brought it up to the deck of the ship and took the hook out, and it started to walk across the deck. I know. So that's that story. This painting is titled Zone of Influence, and it refers to the area on the ocean floor that is targeted and affected by a seismic blast. In the early 90s, marine biologists became concerned about the large number of dead cephalopods washed up on shorelines. The necropsies performed revealed that the squid and octopus all shared one thing in common. They all had burst eardrums, a direct result of seismic testing, which they do to map the ocean floor or mapping for offshore oil and gas reserves. I wanted to highlight the calligraphic beauty of the octopus and to have the painting be strong without the sad story behind it. But I also wanted the opportunity to tell the sad story. This is just an old painting, favorite of mine, of my son trying to encourage me to see what lived below the surface of our pond. And that's our old dog Pico, whose head is out of the water. And this is just a totally exaggerated head of a map turtle, soft-shell turtle. They use that nose, that proboscis, to, when they go to the surface, they just put that at the top of the surface, like a snorkel, and breathe. And that is kind of just an indication of what the pond looks like if you're outside of the pond. So that's just an amalgamation of things. And these are the few of the things that were living in that pond. They're called phantom midges, and they're just about a quarter or a half an inch long, though these are 4 feet. They are now hanging in the stairwell of the Vermont Environmental Lab at the Tech Center in Randolph. This is called Nature and Against Nature. A large oil spill off Alaska spurred me to paint this painting of a resting, disconsolate pelican. But in some ways, it's just about the colors yellow and pale blue. Over the last few years, I have been focusing more on the climate situation and endangered species. Here is Bicknell's thrush, a northeastern American and Canadian bird seen in Vermont. It winters in the Caribbean. It is facing steep population declines attributed to a warming climate and deforestation. I am trying to show the species vulnerability by perching it on a lone stick in a nebulous environment. This raises the old question, should art have a function, or is art art for art's sake? It's a long-standing debate, and the answer in some ways depends on where you live and what century you live in. My interest in endangered species is just that, a very strong interest. If the work does raise awareness about vulnerable species, then that's great, and it does have a function. I just want to learn about these things before they're gone. My painting is kind of a participation I can have with the natural world that helps me clarify things. So I think the answer to the question about whether art should have a function or not is that some art has a function and some for some people and some is art for art's sake, and there's room for both. This is a painting of a, I don't know how to say it, batalieu, an endangered eagle in sub-Saharan Africa. It is a 6-foot wide painting, and the bird, this is for the critical balance show that Linda Mirabile organizes, and the restriction for the artist was that the bird had to be depicted in the real size. So this is a 29-inch bird, and it's that size on the painting. As you can see, this is not a Kenyan landscape, but rather more like Mordor from The Lord of the Rings. I've never been to Kenya, and I have never seen this increasingly rare bird, and that was a real and interesting challenge. I'm interested in biological forms, and like most artists, I have an intuition to do things the way I do them. And in my case, that often involves toggling between realism and fantasy. This is the Caribbean emerald, a type of hummingbird that is now extinct. This is a royal sun angel, or a specimen of one, an endangered species of hummingbird. It's a surprise to many people that the giraffe is now on the endangered species list. Well, there's 3 or 4 different kinds of giraffe, but 2 of them are on that endangered species list. Here is a southern ground hornbill. Again, this was for a critical balance, this show is going to be exhibited at North Branch Nature Center this spring, and it's 6 different artists, and it was just at Highland Center for the Arts, and I have a couple paintings in it. Linda has a number of paintings in it. Southern ground hornbill, it's 5 feet by 4 foot painting, and I used African spices like turmeric, cinnamon, paprika, and pepper in the paint, along with straw to enhance the dusty feeling of this heavy bird walking across the land. This is a small painting of a vulnerable species in Vermont, the American eel, during migration. And I could use silver metallic paint, which was nice. Here is an endangered ring-tailed lemur. All lemurs are endangered as they are solely in Madagascar, which is being heavily deforested and amid civil unrest. This is Sumi ink on Yupo, a Japanese archival synthetic paper. Again, I put my paper on the studio floor and paint standing up with those brushes. This painting was to show that the creature has nothing to hold on to. Oh, and this is one part of that diptych. I just brought this in because I had it and because it would just show you the size of paintings I'm generally talking about. This is a common tern with Lake Champlain and an old, which the common tern is not that common, I guess, with Lake Champlain and an old hitching post from Iceland as a reference. I do want to mention that I have had many, many failures over the years. Here is a large painting called Flux of my studio sinking into the river. But then a wonderful day comes along and the failures fade. This is called Great Expectations, and here my studio is lifted high, precarious. This is VU's field. And here my studio is lifted high, precarious maybe, but facing the sunshine. I feel very fortunate that I could pursue my art path and find so much pleasure, learning, friendships, and new techniques along the way. I so value the experiences I have had, which include doing things for a paycheck that I didn't want to do, having nasty clients, having wonderful clients, being utterly exhausted, looking under rocks and rifling through leaf litter, dragging a net through my pond, and immersing myself in the profound complexities of our natural world. When right now things are so out of kilter, on so many levels, I will nonetheless leave you with this beautiful quote by the photographer Ansel Adams. I believe the world is incomprehensibly beautiful, an endless prospect of magic and wonder. Thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and you can come and look at the brushes and see what it feels like to use them. Yeah, hi, Tracy.
In your personal work, the colors vary so much, or the mood of the texture of the paint
I always use acrylic paint. I mean, it's not that I haven't used oil paint, but because I'm trained to do it, and I paint so large, I think I would have brain damage if I used oil paint. So I've gotten used to it. There's nothing more beautiful than oil paint, I know that, but it doesn't do what I want it to do. I can't be so messy the way I like to be so messy. So it's acrylic paint. And then I'll use chalk, or I'll use turmeric, or any other things that I'll add to it. So, yes.
How did you get into the giant backdrop paintings in New York?
Oh, how did I get into the giant backdrop paintings in New York? I went to the University of Vermont, and then I went to Parsons School of Design. I was interested in art, and so I was in New York City, and there was a fellow student who had a part-time job washing buckets with Sarah Oliphant, my then soon-to-be business partner. And she was leaving for 5 weeks. She was really ditzy to get married, and she said, would you do my job for 5 weeks? And I didn't want to, and I said, sure. And so I met Sarah Oliphant, and I just started painting really large. She has a history of theatrical painting. She was a theater painter major, and she aligned herself, we both aligned ourselves with photographers who had a need for this. So normally photographers were using something called seamless, which is just seamless paper. And then it just became something to have, the big thing were portraits, painting portrait backdrops and skies. So it's so expensive to paint, to photograph on location. And so it's a photographer has much more control if they can photograph in their studio. So we just created the outdoors for them. So that's how, and it was fly by night. I didn't know what I was doing, you know, but it's not that different really to draw like this. It's as if your shoulder is your wrist. So you just sort of have it sort of, your arm is perfectly straight and you sort of lean back. I always think of John Wayne for some reason. And you just, this is as if it's your wrist. It's not really that different. It's just more paint and bigger brushes. Oops. Yeah. And a bigger space to work in. Yes. Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, thank you, August. Thank you very, very much. Thanks. Yes. 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 Yeah. I have a big space in Vermont. I have a big, well, it's 20 by 40, and it's, I painted backdrops up until maybe, well, a while ago, 8 years ago. I painted them up here, and we'd ship them, we'd roll them on the tubes that I showed you, and put them inside PVC piping, cap them off, and send them by FedEx, these 10 and 12 foot long tubes. And they get down there in 2 days. So I painted up here. And then I'd go down for big things like the Tisch wedding, the fashion week. I'd go down and, you know, the fall fashions come out in the spring and the spring fashions come out in the fall. And I'd go down for 2 or 3 weeks and paint down there. So, yes?
Is there any chance that you would ever publish, or you have a book published that you can take home, sit down, read 15 minutes in my lap?
Well, I don't know if you heard that, but she just wondered if I had a book of paintings to look through in front of the fire with a cat in your lap. And I don't, but if you know anybody who'd like to put one together, they can come see me. Yes, Nona.
So many people that go into the arts, of young generation, for them, making a living, which is part of what you've done,
Absolutely.
is a lure and a delusion.
Uh-huh.
And I wondered if you would talk
Mark Jacobs?
Mark Jacobs, I couldn't say, Mark, I know, I'm sorry. These are the last few days, I can't change this motion.
I can't tell you how many times I've said that. And you say no, but the problem is my business partner, Sarah, always says, yes, we can. Yes, we can. So that's been a 40-year battle we've had.
All this marketing and all this production,
Yeah.
and then there's a little piece of you that has grounded yourself in practical matters. And I just wanted to talk about that.
I don't know if I understand. Start to answer it, and then I'll continue. No, what do you mean? That how do I deal with the deadlines, or how do I?
You have to go for being creative and immersed in arts.
Yeah.
And art that you're doing. To answering the phone.
Oh, I see. Well, as I said with backdrop painting, it's really, we're told exactly what to do. We're not in contemplating our navel or thinking, how can I be the most creative? What do I want to do that's really different? We can't do things that are different. We have to, there's production designers, we're getting, like that Jeremiah Goodman watercolor. Copy this. We're copying a good part of the time. Now, that's easily said. It's not so easy to do if you're painting an ocean or a sky. We have to really put our artistic juices in there. But it's business. I mean, backdrops are business, and that's just part of it, And you can make, when I say a lot of money, I mean, now it wouldn't seem like a lot of money, but for somebody who didn't have anything but rent and shoe fetishes, it was great. So, and I think that, you can't predict the future, and who would think that, we're really busy still. We're still painting, stapling cotton canvas to the floor, holding drawings that are cartooned out, using these brushes, when look at what technology can provide. And there was a period in the 80s when Photoshop came out, which is this incredible program, so strong anybody could be a designer, they thought. And so the magazine covers really changed. They'd have spring, summer, winter, fall on them. They'd have 50 million typefaces. Everybody was just like crazy, like on a drug, Photoshop drug. We thought we're out of business by the end of the 80s. We're going to stop and not going to be able to do this anymore. And it didn't happen. I think that so many photographers and fashion designers in particular have gone to art school, and they want brush strokes, they want dripping, they want to smell paint, and they love coming down to the studio and working with an artist. And so, my fingers are still crossed, but they've been crossed for a long time. So I think there's always room for artists in whatever way. Yeah, Linda? I had an incredibly fantastic teacher in high school, Barry Moser, who was my mentor, who still is my mentor. And he had and my mother, my mother taught me so much about natural history, and so it started at a really young age. I've always, always, always been fascinated. I remember being in New York, busy on a deadline, working on this drop, and Sarah's at the other end of the studio, and she said, "Come look at this bug." And I drop my brush, I go running down, and there's no bug. And I said, "What? Where?" And she said, "I said, look at this rug." Oh, I was like, oh, they're crying out loud. So I don't know where it comes from, but I'm just really interested. So it's funny. Yes, Amy.
So you graduated from Vermont College, you went to Parsons, you worked in New York.
Yep.
And then at some point you went back to school.
Oh, yeah, and I was 50 when I went back to get my master's. Yeah. I think I wanted to be stimulated, and I'll tell you the truth, I went into it kind of cocky. I thought, I've been painting and drawing forever. I can nail this thing, And so I applied at the Art Institute of Boston, and I got in, and my feet were really put to the fire. And so that cockiness went away really quickly. And I learned to, I think that really helped me make these three things work together. And it also helped me talk about what I'm doing. If I was going to get my master's in fine art, I better be able to figure out why and how and defend it. And why am I on this continuum, and why did I deserve that? So I learned a little bit to talk about why I do what I do. So it was very, very valuable. You know, one of the first things during a critique, I had this professor, and my paintings were up, and he looks at them all, and he says, so what's more important to you, the subject matter or painting? And I was nervous in front of everybody. I didn't know what to say. I said, the subject matter. And he said, well, then stop painting. So stop painting, like do video or something like that. And I came back with like a vengeance, like why I'm a painter, and I completely defended that of why it was important. So it was a really good program, and I was really happy that I did that. So, good. Well, thank you again. This was fun. And if anyone wants